is about to be super aged. And what that means is about 20% or more of our population is going to be over the age of 65. And I think that's something to celebrate as Canadians and as residents of Canada, that this is really a marker of, a standard of living that we've really come to achieve over the years and a testament to the power of modern medicine. But what I want to point out is that there's a difference between lifespan, which right now is about 82 years in Canada, and health span, which is about 73 years. And health span is a term that's often used when we want to think about how many years are we actually living in reasonably good health? Are we able to make our own decisions? Are we independent? Are we able to take care and participate in our lives and our families in a meaningful way? That 9-year gap between lifespan and health span is important to think about because we're not planning for it. By and large, people are really still, as they do their financial planning and their housing planning, they're really often thinking about aging in place. 90% or so want to age in place, but 62% have not made any plans or any modifications to their homes and are likely not thinking about, oh, what happens if I'm not able to do those stairs for much longer? Or what happens if I have dementia and I'm not able to go out safely on my own, or I stop driving and we live in a relatively car dependent area? 74% have admitted that they don't have any financial plan for long-term care. And so what I will say is that, as wonderful as quote unquote universal healthcare is, a lot of people don't realize that aging care tends not to be covered. You can go see your family doctor if you're hospitalized, things like that are covered. But the moment you need care at home, there is a system that is in dire need of reform. And you may not qualify for services that are subsidized by the government unless you need help with bathing once or twice a week, or you need a supervision for medications half an hour a day. And sadly, right now, that's how our healthcare system works. And sometimes people don't know that. So what is happening in the absence of a system that is providing these services for us is that 75% of care to older adults is on the shoulders of, if they're available and in proximity, usually family care partners. The largest portion is adult children, and second to that is spouses. And 2/3 of them are juggling full-time work while trying to do their best to take care of aging relatives and loved ones. Perhaps unsurprisingly, 71% are experiencing some kind of financial related stress because there wasn't that advanced planning for long-term care. And really what we're often doing is kind of kicking the can down the road, because what it does it look like when people are experiencing financial stress due to caregiving? They might be reducing their hours at work. They might be putting their jobs at risk because they need to balance caregiving with full-time jobs and sometimes their own children and responsibilities. They might be putting their own financial futures at risk in order to care for the current generation of older adults that need support. And so the conclusion that I've come to after 25 years of being in the field and of being a lived care partner for even longer is that aging care is primarily shouldered by intergenerational families in Canada, and mostly in reaction to crisis situations.
One of the reasons that we came together at Aging Alliance is to not just provide services, but solutions. One of the biggest, when people start out on this journey, they often, what we've realized is that a lot of people don't even know where to begin. They don't even know the right questions to ask. And so we want to help them in that journey. And so we came together as an integrated team. We are a collective. We are individual service providers, but we came together because we want to address the fundamental problem people of having very disparate services. So my name is Matt. I'm somewhere up on that slide as well. So, here is our team. Our team is comprised of Dr. Amy Hwang, who is an aging specialist and what does it say there? Care and service navigation. So she has a PhD in aging research and can really help people understand trajectories of health outcomes and care and services that are out there that you might be interested in. Also, on that side of that pie chart, you have Kesri. Kesri is a caregiver coach. So ultimately, as Amy was referring to, there are a lot of people out there who end up taking on the care of their adult parents. They have no experience in doing so. They had no training and they're burning out. And so Kesari is a caregiving coach to help you navigate that journey as well. I'm somewhere on that chart. I'm on the right side there. I come from a real estate asset planning background. So I help people understand how they might access equity of their home in order to cover the costs of care, or how they can restructure their assets, their debts, restructure their portfolios if they have investment properties. We have Patrick, who's unfortunately couldn't be here today. Patrick Ross is a private wealth manager at CIBC Wood Gundy, and he's looking at things from very much a wealth planning and financial planning perspective. He will also put together an entire financial plan for you. He will ensure that your assets will hopefully outlive you. We have Hugo, who unfortunately couldn't be here today either. Last minute, he was flying in from Vancouver, and last minute he had a family health emergency. So unfortunately, he couldn't be here, but he is our expert on the financing side. He's a mortgage broker that he comes up with a lot of creative solutions to help people access equity out of their home to cover those care costs or their care needs, or the costs of nursing homes or assisted living, or even to actually just support one's retirement. There's a lot of instances in which people are still just living off of old age security, but they actually have a $2 million home that they live in, but they're still living with relatively modest needs. But actually, there are opportunities for them as well to live a more comfortable retirement lifestyle. We have Alcina. Alcina is an interior designer who has training and specific expertise in designing spaces that are age friendly, allowing you to age in place, thinking about things like zero barrier access, things like ramps, things like lifts, things like ensuring bathrooms have been properly designed to accommodate wheelchairs and so on and so forth. And then we've got
Me.
him.
The easy way to think about this, guys, because there's obviously a lot of this on the team, is it's health and wealth, right? So those are really the things that you're dealing with as you're aging, as you're taking care of those who are aging. You need somebody to help guide you through the health journey, and that's really kind of that left side of the pie chart there, and somebody to guide you through your wealth journey, and that's the right side of the pie chart there. I'm part of the wealth side. I do deal more with the actual real estate assets, as it were. But as we go through the case, you'll find that's a very small portion of what really makes Aging Alliance.
One thing I do want to mention is that Aging Alliance is not a business. So I've had this question because I was speaking to people before we got up on stage, and we were talking about what it is. I was mentioning what we were going to talk about, and they're asking, "Oh, okay, like how much do we pay you? What's the fee?" Actually, we're not a business. The best way to think about it is that we are a collective. We came together to solve the issues and the problems people were having in navigating this aging journey. We individually are our own service providers. We have our own separate businesses. And so the Aging Alliance doesn't charge a fee. So there is an opportunity for an intake process and an assessment to see who best is suited to be able to help you in your journey. But just to be clear, Aging Alliance itself is not a business, and we don't charge a fee. We came together to be able to help you in an integrated and holistic way.
Okay, so now we're just going to move on to two case studies, and that's going to be the bulk of our presentation, where we bring you through a couple of cases of care planning. And the first is going to be sort of what we see every day is really reactive care planning in a crisis situation. And then we'll show sort of a more proactive case study. And I just want to float out there that right after this main stage presentation, we're going to be heading over to the education pavilion at 3800. And what we'd love is if people have questions about their own situations or things resonated from this presentation with you, we would love to chat and workshop some of your own situations. So I put that out there first. So I'd like to introduce Karima's and her parents. So Karima's parents were living with Alzheimer's dementia, both of them at different stages, living alone in their condo. And many don't realize that the moment you get a dementia diagnosis, it does not mean that you need to stop everything you're doing and move into a care home. And especially with the new medications that are coming to Canada, they're actually delaying the progression of Alzheimer's dementia for longer, meaning that people should be able to live fairly independently and fairly good qualities of life for longer. So for the first few years, Karima's parents were doing fine, and her father was still driving. They lived in Etobicoke. They were still managing at home and critical to their health. They were actually still keeping up with a lot of their social events and within their community. It changed when her father had a few incidents of disorientation and on medical advice decided to stop driving. That changes everything for a lot of people, as you can imagine. And so with the loss of their social life, her mother really started down what I call this downward spiral. Cognitive decline is accelerated when you're not exercising your mind, which is exercise for your cognition. With that also came depression, loneliness, frailty, physical frailty, and really importantly, apathy. She lost interest in everything that brought her joy. And even though her husband, who was her primary caregiver, was not as far along, he was extremely stressed trying to get her to eat every day. And it got to a point where Kesri was getting round the clock calls, just someone's stressed, someone's not eating, somebody has left and we don't know where they are. It got to a breaking point. And I will say, and I connect to presentation earlier in our pavilion on fraud, what really had Karima step up was when her parents fell victim to a financial fraud and lost tens of thousands of dollars to their name. And so she was assigned to be their power of attorney for finances and personal care. And she really decided, I need to step up. Although I'm working full time and although I have young children myself, I need to step up and really take the reins to help future plan for my parents. So when she contacted me, the first thing she said to me was, I can't believe that OHIP doesn't cover home care. What am I supposed to do? They referred me to a private care agency that wants to charge me $40 an hour. I think we need 6 hours a day. How are we supposed to sustain this? And barring the availability of community services like adult day programs that have year-long wait lists, she was in a crisis situation and completely burning out. So that's when her problem became a financial problem. And that's why it's really important to have integrated service providers. So I'll pass it over to the wealth side of the team to tell the rest of the case.
When when Karima approached us, it became very, very apparent that she was part of this classic sandwich generation. She was totally burning out. She had her own young children to attend to. She had her own family. She had her own career. And now she was also became primary caregiver to her parents. And when she approached us, she did not know what to do. And by her own admission, she didn't have a lot of financial acumen and she didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to pay for this care. She didn't know if her parents could age in place, continue living in this condo. She didn't know if her parents should move into long-term care facility. She didn't know how she was going to pay for any of this. So when she came over to the wealth side, again, this is part of the reason that we have a cross-functional intake assessment, because there's the health side and then there's the wealth side and the living side. And so when discussed her situation, it became very, very apparent that she felt like her parents could not continue aging in place. This was a crisis situation. So this case ends up following more of the trajectory of acute reactive case, not proactive planning. We looked at what she had, her and her parents, and we realized, number one, her parents owned the condo. Her parents had $100,000 home equity line of credit. And the reason they had that $100,000 of home equity line of credit is because of that fraud that happened that Amy referred to earlier. Karima didn't have any other significant assets to put toward her parents' living or care situation either. And so when we looked at the situation, we started enumerating all the different options. Do we keep the condo? Do we sell the condo? If we keep the condo, can they continue living there? If they keep the condo and maybe they keep the condo and move into an assisted living facility, and maybe we rent out the condo. There's all these questions were swirling around in her mind, but she didn't know how to assess them. She didn't know if there was going to be enough money. So the first thing that we had to do is determine what was the intention, what was the goal. And after a conversation with her, what we elicited out of her was that she really actually didn't think her parents could continue aging in place in this condo. And so it became apparent that her parents were going to have to move into an assisted living facility. And this is when, again, because we work in a cross-functional team, I had to go back to Amy and I had to ask Amy, okay, so given their health situations and their health trajectory, what type of care are her parents going to need? And so Amy and I had this conversation, and she was talking about assisted living. She was talking about memory care because the parents had Alzheimer's and dementia. And she was talking about the trajectory of what they would require in terms of care and in terms of costs. So now we had an idea of what that might cost. And the next question is matching that up to any assets and wealth they might have. And I'll tell you, one of the things Karima said to us right in the beginning was that she just said, oh my God, this is all the money that we have. It's all locked up in this condo. If we use up this money and that's it, I don't know what I'm going to do with my parents afterward. It's not an option for them, unfortunately, for them to move in with me. So what am I going to do? She was so deathly afraid that the money or the equity in the condo, those funds, she was deathly afraid that there was not going to be enough. So after enumerating all those options, we enumerated the options of, again, keeping the condo. But you keep the condo, you still have a bunch of equity in the condo. But we determined, again, consulted with Ming on the real estate side. Apparently, the condo was worth about $700,000. So we knew there was about $700,000. We knew that there's $100,000 of debt. So we knew that there's about $600,000 of equity. How are you going to access that equity? If you keep the condo, normally that comes in the form of a mortgage, but they were living off of old age security. How are they going to qualify for a larger mortgage? And how are they going to pay for a monthly mortgage payment? That seems counterintuitive when they're low on funds, they're low on income, they're low on cash flow. So it seemed counterintuitive. So unfortunately, Hugo isn't here. Hugo could be talking to you about other solutions on how they would access that. So I'm not going to get into that right now. But suffice to say, it was not an option to keep the condo. So what was the other option? It was to sell. So we ran a scenario in which we would sell the condo and then we would take those proceeds and we'd use those proceeds toward covering the costs of institutionalization of care for Karima's parents. And so we ran a high-level feasibility exercise. We wanted to better understand, with this much money and with this much in monthly costs for assisted living, I mean, how much is assisted living? And with the trajectory of the cost toward memory care?
Yeah, so I would say that assisted living, we were estimating anywhere, given that both of them had dementia, we were estimating anywhere from $5,000 a month. And with increasing physical needs, because dementia is a progressive disorder, it could have gone up well beyond $12,000 a month when you need everything from feeding to changes and so on.
So from a very basic perspective, we modeled all of this very quickly just to determine feasibility, just to determine whether or not there would be enough quote unquote affordable years. From a very high level, We modeled this and it looked like we were almost there. But we also recognize the limitations of what we do. Again, I work in real estate asset planning and real estate advisory. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not a wealth advisor. So this is very basic, but the next one takes into account a lot more. And this is when we brought in Patrick. Patrick is a wealth advisor and a private wealth manager from CIBC Wood Gundy, and he's an integral part of our team. Fortunately, he couldn't be here today, so I'm going to have to speak on his behalf. Patrick modeled a full financial plan for them using the inputs from the rest of the team in terms of how much is the condo worth, how much debt's on the condo, how much is care going to cost, what's the trajectory of that care, how long is it going to take approximately to sell, how much is it going to cost to make the necessary repairs to the condo before we list it for sale, all those things, right? And the beauty of it is all of that expertise laid within our Aging Alliance as a collective team. So he took what the inputs that we had used before, and he modeled it in a much more sophisticated way, accounting for tax, accounting for inflation, and accounting for what he would actually invest the money in. So you took the proceeds from the condo sale, and then he put them into, depending on the situation and the time horizon and risk thresholds, but there's a lot of different financial products. The one that we ended up using here was something called structured notes. And structured notes is a financial product. Again, I'm not the financial whiz. Patrick is the private wealth manager. From a very high level, structured notes is basically a fixed income product that delivers a minimum 10% return. So it's almost like GIC or something like that, but it gives you 10% instead of 2% or 2.5%. So Patrick modeled all of that. And then now you can see the difference between our basic modeling and our more sophisticated modeling. The key takeaway here is after he modeled it correctly and with more detail, the number of affordable years reached 95 plus. And that was the key. So we took this financial plan and we presented it to Karima. And when we did so, you could see the weight of the world literally lift off of Karima's shoulders. There was this sigh of relief. Like she had been so inundated and burdened by this decision of like, oh my God, this is all the money we have. If it runs out, I don't know what I'm going to do. And we put together a financial plan that would ensure that her parents would be taken care of to the age of 95. So that was the planning part. Then we moved on to the actual execution of that. That's where Ming came in.
I didn't know I was going to talk about this.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, so what we did at that point is with our parents aging, it's not just a regular sale of a home. A lot of what we kind of glossed over was there was a lot of stop and go. Unfortunately, through this whole process, as we were going through the process of analyzing her financial options, cancer diagnosis, and the father was mugged as well. So we kept running into these reasons that we had to speed up and then stop, speed up and stop. And I remember once talking with Karima, and she was apologizing to me for kind of their inconsistent approach to the plan. And I said, that's not what this is about. This is about ensuring that your father and your mother are taken care of in this process. The rest of it, honestly, it's a home sale. We make sure it's seamless. We get the place staged, blah, blah, blah. You guys know the regular realtor spiel. The difference is making sure that we have the actual end goal in mind, which is taking care of the family. Sure. Yeah, I'll go into another case study. So that kind of wraps up Karima's case. What we do now is kind of going from a reactive crisis case into somebody that is very forward-looking, very proactive. So I'll just grab the thingy here. Okay, so I'd like to introduce you to Annie. I'm going to walk forward a bit because my eyes are not good and I can't see my own slides very well. So basically, her father was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And, the thing about Parkinson's, if you're familiar with the disease, it doesn't get better. There's no cure from Parkinson's. The best case scenario is you slowly, linearly progress in Parkinson's, and it slowly gets worse over time, unfortunately. Knowing this, Annie looked forward and said, okay, like the writing is on the wall. What am I going to be able to do to take care of my parents as they age? So, at the time she was living in downtown Toronto. Her parents were in Mississauga, and she's a really involved daughter. She's there for all the doctor's appointments. She's there to make sure that, nothing's lost in translation. She's making sure she's keeping an eye on the medications that they need to take. But that does, there's a responsibility to that. And it's tough for her because she has a successful career, both her and her husband. So she was traveling back and forth between Mississauga and Toronto quite often. So, with the writing on the wall, she needed to figure out a solution that would allow her to be physically closer. She wanted to maintain that ability to stay involved in her parents' life. She wanted to make sure that she was continuing to be there for all the appointments, but the constant back and forth between Mississauga and Toronto was getting tough, especially because a lot of these things happen in the middle of the day, which is, obviously disruptive for her work. Now, some of the challenges she faced, though, was having her parents kind of agree to this. Many people, especially, immigrant families that come here, they have a tough attitude, right? Coming from nothing, not speaking the language of this country, grit is what has gotten them this far. So grit is, what will continue to get them along. And for a while, her parents did not love the idea at all of their daughter taking care of them. But eventually her father understood the progression of his disease. I won't, relented is maybe a strong word, but understood that, his daughter was going to be more involved in this. Her mom, however, was not quite the same. She was in much better health and she had a strong community in Mississauga. So it was a tough ask for her to give up those things to live in some sort of integrated situation, right? And, Amy touched on this. Having that life, that social life, is not just about being entertained. It literally has cognitive impact. So we didn't want to take that away. So what we're actually dealing with here, right, this is not a real estate problem. We're dealing with support for the father as his health, continues to slowly decline. The ability to maintain independence between the two families. That's key, right? If we don't do that, people aren't going to be happy. And we want to minimize disruption because, daughter and son-in-law, both very busy. And then the father has a lot of health appointments and things like that. And we don't want to make that disruptive for him either. So what we came to is before we even started executing, before we started looking at potential places for them to live, we want to be really clear on what those goals that we were trying to achieve with a potential move or whatever it is. What were those goals that we wanted? So one, allow the father to age in place. We knew that his mobility was going to get worse and worse over time with Parkinson's. So we needed something that, a property that would be able to grow with that. So obviously not a, 3-story townhouse in downtown Toronto, which he's, going to have to climb flights of stairs. That's not what we were looking at. The other thing is some sort of independence between the two families. Maybe this is a split living situation. Maybe it's a multifamily situation where we've got 2 units, but something that allows them to keep some sort of independence, with each other. And I already spoke to the mobility. So based on those goals, we then started to create our options, our plans. So the first one that we came up with was, condos. Why don't we just get 2 condos within the same building that will allow them to have independent living and still allow her to be relatively close to her parents? And this was a good plan. We did go out and try to find this, but it was not as easy as we expected it to be. One, we were operating in a much hotter real estate market, so there weren't lots of condos on the market that weren't getting sapped up pretty quickly. But 2, she still wanted to be relatively close. So we were trying to find places where we had condos available for sale on the same floor. That was really tough, right? Within the same building, not so bad, but kind of if we were trying to get in the same floor, that was almost impossible. The other thing that we started to look at too was taking their existing home, and renovating it. Could we take where their parents currently living in Mississauga and turn it into some sort of multifamily situation? We went down this whole rabbit hole of how do we finance that? We looked at, reverse mortgage options, refinancing options. Where we ultimately landed, though, was we weren't going to do that renovation. One, majorly disruptive, right? Where were her parents going to be while all this was happening? And then 2, there simply wasn't enough space to create proper 2-unit living situation, to have that independence between the families. And it was nice because we were able to lean on our construction background. Both Matt and I have expertise in construction to be able to feed in the parameter to say like, oh, we're probably looking at a $300,000-$400,000 renovation for this to happen. So where we finally landed was finding a multi-generational compatible home. If you go look on MLS today, you'll find there's very few properties which are truly set up as multi-generational homes. Most of these properties, you're going to need to do some level of renovation, right? So that's where we landed. And then maybe we could find something that would work for her. So, as I mentioned, knowing that this was going to be hard to find, we did start looking at houses. We looked at properties and we were evaluating, oh, could we add a kitchen here? How difficult would that be? Where's the plumbing stacks located so we could easily convert this? Could we turn this 3-piece bathroom into a 4-piece bathroom to enable full ground floor living? We were approaching a house search with a very different lens because we're looking at it for conversion, not necessarily for living. And that's where, the background in construction is very helpful. At the same time, we were still looking for the unicorn, right? We were still hoping we could find a house that we didn't have to do lots of renovations to meet their needs. And, spoiler alert, we did actually find that house. Funny enough, it was built by an architect. It was a custom built home built by an architect out in Oakville who wanted to age in place. He was in his 80s and when he was selling it, and at that point in time, he had already aged in place. It was time for him to go into care that was a little bit more supportive. So we found a home where it was basically a bungalow, but then with a secondary unit on the top floor, allowing her family, Annie's family, to have their independence upstairs, but not to have anybody living in a basement, right? Because many of these duplexes are set up so the upstairs is nice, but it's basically a rental basement unit downstairs. And that would not be palatable for either family. So now I should backtrack a little bit about this. Annie did a lot of this without fully getting her parents' buy-in. She had some buy-in, but her mother still rightly didn't want to leave the place she'd been in for over 30 years. So her strategy, and this was quite smart, was to have her parents slowly transition to the new home. So what she did was, there's a doctor's appointment? Great. Come over. I'll take you to the doctor's appointment. Stay for dinner. Bring your bags. Stay for a night. Stay for 2 nights. Slowly, a weekend became 3-4 days, became weeks. And her mom was able to rebuild that social network in Oakville, which was ultimately where they ended up. That was really key because it was tough initially for her mother to imagine living anywhere else. And it was so important to reestablish that community for her. So that slow moving process really helped. And when it came finally time for them to sell that home after 30 years, it was a lot easier because they had essentially moved out already at that point. I just talked about that. And yeah, at the end, we hit our goals. We were able to get accessible living for her dad, everything on the main floor, which was great. Annie and her husband maintained their independence and her parents still have independence as well. And it's a solution not just for the short term, but it is for the long term as well. That's Annie.
Yeah. So I think, how much time do we have? If there are any questions, we're happy to take them. And just a reminder, we'll be heading over to the Healthy Aging at Home Pavilion. If any of these cases give ideas or relate to some of the things on your mind, we would love to chat or maybe workshop through a case that any of you have.
Yeah,
Do we
so
have
I
time?
think our presentation was supposed to be 25 minutes and we were going to leave 20 minutes for questions. Instead, our presentation took 45 minutes and we're completely out of time. But that said, that's why we booked some time over at the Healthy Aging at Home Pavilion, which is that away. Oh, do we still have time for questions?
Yeah, if you want, I'm just gonna. Come.
All right. Well, let's do it.
Your cue. There you go. Does anybody have any questions for our panel that we have up here? Just raise your hand. I'll come out to you. Okay, then how about a big round of applause for our panel? Now, you guys are going to be available for the next couple of minutes off to the side, and then you if you'd like to go back to the pavilion, you guys are going to escort them. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we're going to hang around here. If you wanted kind of fire off questions to us while we're up on stage, cool. If we're down here hanging out, come talk to us. Ultimately, by 4:15, we are going to go to the Healthy Aging at Home Pavilion back there, and that is where we're going to do some live workshopping. If you're so inclined and you want to share your scenarios and your situations and your circumstances with us, we can work through it in real time and real-time solutioning over there. If you want to pull one of us aside and have a more private conversation, that's absolutely possible as well. The only thing I'd like to add is feel free to scan this QR code. It will take you to a place where you can subscribe and you can stay up to date on. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Hello.
I've got a question back here, and then I'll come over to you, ladies.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very much so.
First of all, thank you very much. That was incredibly informative because we are that sandwich generation. In both cases you presented, Kirsini's and straight to the cycle, Annie's, was there ever a conversation about whether the care in assisted living would be as good as aging in place? Because that's a big question, right? You always worry about your parents being really taken care of as well as you would if you are able. I just want, if you could, any of you could speak to that.
Yeah. So sorry, if the care at home, if the care in the care home could compare to care at home. So certainly in Karima's case, that was a huge concern. Her family is from East Africa, so there is definitely a cultural component to that. The main thing was that they were not able to afford a private care in the home. But and certainly with groups that are smaller in size in terms of ethnic groups, and being able to find somebody with that connection to the family would have been difficult at home. But that's definitely a concern. And I will say that that's one of the, even if they were to be able to qualify for a bed in long-term care, which was unlikely because they were not in a crisis situation according to Ontario Health at Home, they likely would not be able to get that kind of culturally sensitive care either. And that's why they wanted to be able to shop around for a private assisted living home that ultimately had sort of a community of people from their ethnic group. So that's why they had to go private. And that's often why people are waiting 10 years for long-term care for Chinese or Korean or East, whatever it is.
I have a question over here.
I just wanted to know if you can tell me what you're going to be covering on the other end there.
So on the other side, we're just going to live workshop. So our intention is to go over there and actually take questions from the audience, see if we can help them in real time.
We have no prepared presentation over there. We are hoping, if you're so gracious enough, for you to share your situations and your scenarios and your circumstances with us. What problems are you facing? What obstacles are you facing? What are the top of mind issues that are keeping you up at night? And we hope that we could talk about it and maybe shed some light and provide some insight. It would really be, if you will, sort of akin to what an intake assessment might be if you took us up on a 30-minute free complimentary consultation with the Aging Alliance. And so it would just be done in sort of a group setting, if you will.
Got a question over here? And then I'll come to you.
I think a really big question for me is, how do we navigate what is covered under OHIP for our elderly? Because I'm sure everybody wants to explore that option before they start paying for anything.
Yeah, so just to repeat the question, what is covered under OHIP and how do we navigate that? So generally, primary care and hospitalization are covered under OHIP. If you need additional care at home, so for example, a personal support worker to come into your home, the organization is called Ontario Health at Home now. It used to be called CCAC. A care coordinator comes and does an assessment of your needs. Generally, they are extremely conservative in what they will provide. And oftentimes they will say, our personal support worker can only help your parent with bathing, period. If that's not what you need, you're not able to get that support. And people living with dementia who have relatively high levels of care needs often only get 3 or 4 hours a week. So we are living in a system where, suffice it to say, OHIP doesn't cover very much home care, if any. Yeah.
And that's part of the reason that we have Kesri on our team. Kesri is a caregiver coach. She understands the health navigation system and the services available. She helps caregivers, often adult children of the aging adults. She helps them figure out what to say to the social worker who is the case manager for their parents' file. and what to say, what not to say, what services are available, what are free, what's private, all of those things. And that's part of the reason that so the impetus of what she does is very much to answer those types of questions and help those people who are often the sandwich generation, right? Young children, aging parents, and stressors from every facet of life. And so Kestri is very well equipped to help in that regard. And that's the focus of her service within Aging Alliance.
I've got another question right here.
After your 30-minute free consultation, what are your rates after that?
So our rates, we don't have rates. Again, it's because Aging Alliance is not a business unto itself. We are a collective of different service providers who have come together to be able to offer solutions in a very holistic and integrative way to clients, which means, then to answer your question, each one of us has our own services to provide and thus our own way of monetizing that and charging for that. So we have a realtor, we have a interior designer, we have an aging expert who provides consulting services on the health outcomes and care trajectory. We have real estate investment advisory, we have private wealth management, we have caregiving coaching. What else have I missed? We have a mortgage broker who helps on the financing front. So it's just we're regular service providers and we provide services the same way that many other service providers do. The difference is in how we've come together to solve our clients' challenges and needs.